Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Leander ISD Council of PTAs Advocacy Update. This is a new series that we are starting in order to inform our community and our PTAs and all of our members out there about what's going on. And our focus right now is a legislative session. My name is Desaray Granzow. I am the president of the Council of PTAs. We have fellow board member Cara Owen on with us right now. She's on our Advocacy Committee. And our special guests tonight, who we're going to be talking with, are two of our trustees at Leander ISD. We have trustee Trish Bode and trustee Anna Smith. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We asked these two lovely individuals to join us tonight so that they could give us their perspective on what's happening in the third special legislative session. And the focus of this session right now is really on public education and vouchers or ESA. So that would be education savings accounts. So we're going to back up a little bit and talk about this special session and what it is. So if you all could tell us just what does it mean to have a special session?
Thank you. And thank you so much, PTA, for inviting us to talk, because Anna and I, our legislative committee, loves to talk about the subject. We really want to help kind of educate and bring awareness to some of these issues. So the third legislative special session, when you hear the word special session, that means that it's the governor who's putting this issue on the call. The governor decides what's going to be on this docket, what can lawmakers talk about, what they can pass, and what they can discuss. The governor did put several things on this call. There's some things about a COVID vaccine. We've got border discussion on there. But for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to focus on one that the governor had for education freedom. And in his call, it's legislation providing education savings accounts for all Texas school children. And so you'll notice in that call, there is nothing about school finance or our public education funding. And so what happens when the governor sends out a call, legislative call, he can expand the call if he wants as you go along, or he can change it. He actually did that for one of the border ones, but he's not doing that for education freedom. We've heard from the House that our House representatives have said that who were trying on the Educative Committee to put something together, some type of I don't know, something where we could all agree or something, some type of legislation like that. Those lawmakers have been reaching out to the governor saying, please include finance. We want school finance on here. And he won't even go the extra for them to do that. The Senate has a different way of approach. So when you have a special sessions can last for 30 days and then they're done. And then the governor can call another one, right? Legislation can sine die earlier. That means they can end earlier, but typically they run about 30 days. So what you have is you have two different bodies who have very different ways and approach of how they want to deal with this discussion. And so from the House point of view, the House is putting finance and vouchers together in a discussion. Because what they don't want to see, I would argue, is they don't want to see vouchers go without that finance portion. Remember, though, your trustees are going out there saying we don't want to see them together, because when you put them together, you're kind of making it a deal, right? And you're not supportive of a deal. We want to talk about funding for our public schools. That's our area. That's what we need. We need funding for our teachers. We need the funding for our kids in our classroom. That's what we want to have a discussion about. They left the regular session with over $32 billion. They came in with a surplus. They came in with over 32 billion. They left with still money sitting on the table. There was a good portion of that funding still available. And they had put aside a small amount for school, which was 4 billion. And now they're talking about, okay, well, we're giving y'all more, but we'll still say, yeah, but that's not anywhere where we're talking about what the needs are in public education right now. So House has one way to approach it. And the Senate's way of approaching it is they've made them separate. So they have school finance and they have vouchers. And I know the question is, wait, if the Senate could approach it separately, why can't the House? It's just the different way those different chambers are set up to function. The House will not hear bills that are not on the call. The Senate has fine hearing bills that aren't on the call. They'll still pass it. they'll pass it. But when it comes back to them, I think I'm wondering if you really called their bluff, they really would pass the school finance right now. I will say when SB1 came out of the Senate, it was the voucher bill, and the Republican senator who voted against that in the Senate was Senator Nichols. So you do have, I would argue, some rural GOP support from that one senator, and you're seeing a lot more rural support too in the House. And so that is where ultimately it's getting stalled down. When it came out of the Senate, the voucher bill is being right now described, or it's being put in the form of an ESA, it's an education savings account. The thing with the education savings accounts that came out of the Senate is it has 5 vendors that kind of disperse of the funds. And in addition to that funding that they'll get or that they're putting aside, they're also doing a 5% and a 3% for administrative cost. So a total of 8% administrative cost on an ESA, in addition to a marketing budget they wanted to add as well, so that the ESA can be marketed to the community. And so I'll just kind of stop there. I feel like I gave you a big high level, and I feel like I'm making y'all drink from a fire hydrant. So I'll stop and see what y'all have questions.
That's a lot. And I know Trustee Smith has some things she probably wants to say here, but I'm going to ask a couple of questions because there are a few things. So first of all, just to catch everybody up, this session started October 9th, and the Senate Committee on Education immediately was, hearing testimony on SB1, which is the ESA, or otherwise known as loosely vouchers, right? That voucher legislation. And I listened to the testimony, and, obviously, folks that are, like yourselves, public education advocates were against it. But, look, special education is very much against it as well. I'm in that sphere too. The reality is, if I wanted to have my child go to a private school, they would probably be rejected from the private school because private schools have no obligation whatsoever to serve the needs of children with an IEP. So that's just the reality. So when we say school choice, it seems very odd to me because most of us, that doesn't equate into a choice at all. But anyways, if we talk about legislation and where it's at, the Senate then, the committee referred it, and then Senate voted, and so it passed through the Senate. So now it goes over to the House, and it's been sitting in the House for like 2 weeks, basically. And when we talked with Representative Goodwin, we did have a discussion with Representative Vicki Goodwin, who's one of our 9 legislators that covers Leander ISD, which is a 202 square mile district. It's really, really large district. But we had a great conversation with her last week. That was intended to be our first of our series, but we had technical issues, which is fine. But the conversation, we grabbed a couple of good nuggets out of, and one was just that, look, the impasse that they're having on this legislation, we don't really see that being cleared quickly or easily, because it really is, it's coming from the same source that it was previously when it failed in the initial session, the regular session, which is primarily these rural representatives, these rural Republicans, that there's really no benefit of a system like this because, for a lot of reasons, and I know Cara had some information on that, but, when your school, your rural school, and there is no private school within 1 to 2 hours of you, it's hard to see how that's going to be a true, impetus of choice, right, for anybody. So I think that that's one of the concerns, and it seems like that contingent is still there, and they've sort of dug in. So do we see this going anywhere anytime soon? And just to let you know, Alexis Frezza is entering here, or another council member for us.
I'll answer your question, and then I want to give it over to Anna too, because Anna's been having some conversations on special education. I can give them a little bit, but no, I do not see them going anywhere this special session. I say that, and I'll always put a caveat because it's a legislative session, and humans do interesting things. And just because something can be a complete deadlock, I've seen it happen time and time again, where it doesn't look like anything's moving. someone talks to somebody over dinner and all of a sudden it goes, it's on the floor, it's in the committee, it's being voted out, it's moving. So just because you feel like there's a stalemate, that doesn't mean that you just turn it off and go home.
Right.
Your legislative committee is going to be watching very, very carefully. Because the things are still there, session's still open, things can still happen. At this point, it appears they are at a deadline. The Senate is, stuck on their bill as the way it came out, where they have vouchers in one and finance in the other. The House is a different kind of design, I would argue, in the ESA, where there's a little bit more accountability. But they have a lot of different design in the finance of it, of what they want to do for school funding. They're miles apart. And the governor wants, and he's been very clear and has said it over and over again, he wants legislation first that will deal with an ESA that has the opportunity that every child could possibly partake in it for universal school choice. So, I don't even think you could argue, I wouldn't argue that's what the Senate delivered either. So I think they're all kind of in these different spots. And so until they can, if they don't come together, then nothing moves. Which is, yeah.
I was gonna say, there's two questions that kind of come from that for me. The first is still wrapping this all around the rhetoric of school choice. I think that's the first thing, when we all know that there's really not a choice, and that's exactly what those rural Republicans are saying, and that's exactly what anybody in the special education sphere seems to be saying. But it also seems to be those two things are the bargaining chips. So if this legislation is going to move, it's going to be the deal making around either one of those issues or both of those issues by sweetening the pot, so to speak. We've heard that, but that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. That doesn't seem to be an effective method. But I always worry when I see this, that special education is going to be the bargaining chips. And we always see our students, our kids, our most vulnerable, being used in that way. Anna, do you have any insight on this or comments, anything that you're hearing? Or
Well, I mean, let's be honest, our children with disabilities in Texas have been the bargaining chip since 2004, because this is all part of their rhetoric to paint that our public schools are failing our kids. And unfortunately, they found a population of students that they know that they can prey on and just continue to cut away their services to create this narrative that their local schools are failing them. And so you're right, Desaray, they're going to give us that carrot. I mean, we saw it already with the ESAs for $1,500. It was this, here, go get your child an iPad, or here, you can provide therapy, even though parents with disabilities know that $1,500 is going to pay for 2 therapies, if that. But again, when you're a parent who's who's desperate just to get your child help, who wants to have your voice heard, who, understanding that, the special education allotment hasn't been updated since 1991, services have changed. It's created a perfect storm. And so I think at the end of the day, what's going to happen is we're going to see the way our legislators and our state and our governor has treated our kids with disability. Let's be honest, they don't care. The cap proved that. There's been no accountability from TEA in regards to the cap being imposed, which, by the way, came from a 2004 Public Education Hearing Committee. And the whole reasoning for that was because they felt districts, which, by the way, local control districts, were over identifying students, when in reality, our population was growing. And so this perfect storm has been in place since 2004. And unfortunately, you're right, Desaray, the special education community is going to be, I'm worried and I'm scared, but I think that that's where parents, we talk about parent rights and parent voice. That's where our parents truly have the power to really make change. And that's where I really believe when he talks about parent voice, yeah, he's going to see these parents like us who know the power of public education. But I think also we know what we got to do for our kids. So it's scary, but I also feel for the first time, we're seeing a collaboration and a partnership with districts and public and special education advocates, which, have not always been on best terms. And I completely understand that. And so I think there's some power in that. So.
Yeah, and I mean, just from the testimony alone, we saw Disability Rights Texas, we saw Autism Society of Texas, we saw a number of folks come out there, and when they were questioned, the question was, well, won't your kids be better off with kids like them in a private, and that just kind of told me that those were folks that were in a position of power looking at this that don't really understand at all the landscape of special education. They don't understand IDEA or that it even exists. And they don't understand what due process is or why that matters. They don't understand these key mechanisms that help keep our kids and our families as safe as we can when things don't go well, or when we need to advocate, hard for things. And those are protections that are built in. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting if we look at this, increasing the amount of the ESA for special education folks won't really do a whole lot for us. I mean, to get into a private school that provides the services that you need, the bottom price for tuition is around $25,000, but it goes up to $45,000, $50,000 a year for that type of specialized care, and they can still dismiss that child from the program. So there's not much protection there. Let's talk funding real quick, though. As I understand it, when we talk about state employees, we talk about salaries. Teachers were the ones that were left out of the increase in salary, the only ones left out in that increase of salary. And now that is being roadblocked by ESA. Where is that roadblock coming from? Can you guys, I know, but I just want to educate our public. What is causing that roadblock? Because we have SB1 and we have SB2. SB1's about ESA, SB2 is about essentially salary increase for teachers. They both passed through the Senate, as far as I understand. Is that correct? Or were they get, yeah. And so now we're stalled on those. Can you help us understand why?
Yeah, so it still goes back to different chambers' approach of how they're trying to address what the governor's put on the call. Let's be clear, the governor has not put teachers on the call. He has not put their salary on the call. He has not put an increase in funding for them on the call. It's not on the call. So both the Senate and House I do believe they're hearing. I think that's why you see this discussion. I don't think the discussion of what the Senate is providing is nearly what we need for our teachers, but you see them addressing something because I think they're hearing people. But it's not that, neither one, either the Senate approach or the House approach, none of those can move without the governor changing his call. His call right now does nothing for school finance, does nothing for teachers. It is strictly for ESI.
I just want to add, and I feel like what Trish said, it's not on the call, and I feel like it's almost, I hate to say it, but it's politicians playing politics with public education here. And let's go ahead and throw something that we know it's not going to amount to anything because it's not on the call, and try to gain support. And let's be honest, a lot of individuals, they're not paying attention to what's going on at the Capitol because they're dealing with life and they're trying to pay their bills and they're trying to put food on the table. And it's not going to impact majority of us Texans until we realize it's said and done. And so I feel like it's talking points that they can go and grab in social media headlines. Oh, look, we care about our teachers. Oh, by the way, it's not on the governor's call, but we're going to go ahead and discuss it. And so I feel like it's just another way to play politics with their teachers and public education. And it's frustrating.
And districts across Central Texas and across the United States, when teachers are on board, not teachers, trustees, and I think teachers are on board, of course, with the salary raise, but trustees and districts have all been talking about, by increasing your basic allotment, that is the area that doesn't have a whole bunch of like strings, other than the strings are to put it into our salaries. So last time we saw an HB3, an increase go in basic allotment, Leander ISD put 100% of that back into our salaries. So that basic allotment area ties into a salary increase. There's a percentage already in there. I've not heard any trustees say that they would mind if they wanted to increase the percentage that goes to teachers and librarians, counselors, nurses. I mean, that is where we're asking for the funding to go. Because when you start tying it to other things, we're seeing, as it's written out in the bill, that it's actually being tied out to more commissioner initiatives. It's taking away local control, which all goes back to when you don't give that flexibility for the funds, it's going to ultimately end up putting the teachers in.
Yeah, the language on that piece of legislation is very interesting. And then they have all these scales, right, for the different levels of pay, and then, size district, and, all this. And it's just, it's head spinning. It's not really, and it's not effective because the amounts that are listed to are so minuscule that it really is not going to be a tremendous impact. It's better than nothing, but at the same time, why are we talking about nothing and being better than nothing? That's a really low bar. So, and so you mentioned basic allotment again. I'll just mention so that folks know, so we catch them up to speed. But, council PTAs, we have legislative priorities that we set at the beginning, back at the beginning of the regular session for the 88th legislature, back at the beginning of the year, almost in lockstep with what Leander ISD has, is almost exactly the same thing. And then again, for this session, we're on the same page. And one of the things that you mentioned, first of all, you all have a resolution that you passed for adequate funding for public schools, which has a lot of these very important items in them, with more, but obviously right in line with the legislative priorities that you set up, and basic allotments in there and so forth. And then that's right in there with your legislative priorities for the special session. So I want to make sure everybody understands that that is available on the LISD website, under, legislative priorities, legislative committee. They can find this. It's readily available. There's a whole page dedicated to it, along with a listing of all of their local representatives that they can contact and their contact information. Please, folks, utilize that, keep up with it, check this out. I know, I watch the board meetings, but I know not everybody does, and that's okay. We can help parse that for folks, but it's really important to pay attention to this because we have to keep advocating. I think there is a feeling from everybody that I've been talking to that, look, these sessions are going to keep coming. We can expect a November session. We can expect other sessions, right? Because they're going to keep getting called, and it will be a reliance on fatigue. So if we finally get worn down, then they can pass something, right? And so we really have to continue to be active, just make it a part of your routine, essentially. And making sure the governor knows your feelings on this, and making sure your legislators know, and making sure you speak up. Alexis Frezza joined us. I wanted to just say hi to Alexis. She is our parliamentarian. She's also part of our advocacy committee. So Alexis, if you have any questions, jump in with them. So
can I ask one real quick? Anna had mentioned how most Texans aren't going to realize how this is going to affect them until it's like well down the road and actually affecting their day-to-day life. So can you kind of detail, like, if something like this were to pass, like how is that going to affect our students in Leander ISD?
That's a hard question. I can only speak from experience because when we used to live in Illinois, we were at the very beginning when they were doing the vouchers. And I think what's scary for me is that what I'm seeing here leading up, the constant defunding of public education and this whole narrative of your local school is failing you. Oh, look at this shiny new charter school. Oh, look at this new voucher. Oh, I can save you. I think, sorry, my family. I think what ended up happening though, I remember this, it was my last year there. Parents got mad, and that's like PTAs stormed the Capitol. And I don't mean it that way, but I meant they were angry and they were mad because their public schools were not what they used to be. And so I think if anything is to keep we've got to keep engaging our parents. And I think the big thing is parents need to understand is they don't care what I have to say. They look at me as just a school board member who doesn't know anything. Let's be honest. What they want to hear from is from parents. And I know for a fact, as a parent who's gone down there and advocated, the power and the change that you have with your voice. So I think that's what they need to do, Cara, is truly like start engaging with their local community, and also like engaging with their local schools. There's so much potential we have that people don't understand what we do at our local schools and how we serve our kids, but also like our community as a whole. So I'm scared, Cara, I'm going to be honest. But I also see the positive with y'all doing this kind of session and educating the public and seeing trustees from around Texas coming together, because that wasn't the case, guys. I'm going to say like 4 years ago when I got on the board, it was just weird. We just, we're doing our own thing. We're going to take care of us, but it's like the greater good. What are we going to do to take care of public education?
And if I can say, the dialogue that we're seeing now, when you look at further tackling the funds that public education would use with something like an ESA, then you can only see an intensified amount of, well, we don't have money for that. Well, we can't help you with your salaries. We can't help you with those things. And so, the ESA funding will be addressing some of your FSP in some bills. And even if they get it to GR, I will point out that how do I do this without getting in the weeds? When the finance bill came, there's a supplemental appropriations bill, and they took $8 billion out of Article 3. They cut it out and put it right into GR. It got swept in your supplemental SB 30. And then they gave you back $8 billion. And so now, your legislators going, oh, we gave you all this money for Article 3. Y'all are making so much. Well, no, you swept that money too in another bill. So the discussions of having something like an ESA mean that we would see a further reduction of funds. And we're already having such a hard time now making the arguments and explaining to them why our teachers and students need these funds. So we would only make it even harder. And right now, the Commissioner of Education is saying that we need to have larger class sizes and we need to do bigger class size ratios like that of California. So that's why you'll see our legislative initiatives are about local control. We want to keep the Article 7 that was envisioned of a Texas public school free education.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's always seems to be this shell game with the money. And again, in talking about special education, we had the cap, right? And then that was uncovered and discovered. I mean, and you look at the data, it was clearly happening. It was proven. And then what happened was not more money flooding in. It was, we got penalized and the state's like, oh, great. So you get less money. And, okay, so we have more kids that need more services and they're behind now. And we're finally identifying them like we should be. And we're trying to get up to where we should be. Plus we have more population moving in and we have additional kids that are in the system that get identified. And now we have even less money to do that, to provide those services. So it's just so counterintuitive. It's really kind of basic stuff too. It doesn't really take much to figure out that that's not going to work. I think most average people understand that that's not going to work. So this constant sort of defunding is a little frustrating, and a lot of unfunded mandates as well. Look at the security elements that we have, look at, just a lot of things that we've had in the past couple of years that are unfunded. And yet public education is supposed to somehow make that work. And it doesn't add up. All right. So a couple of parting thoughts on this. I think the first is just, you guys kind of summed it up. What do we need to do? And I think the answer is we need to keep advocating. We need to keep getting engaged. And the cool thing is, I feel like this seems to be the year where we're seeing more engagement post-COVID, just overall with everything, with all the things. And we keep seeing that increase. So from the PTA lens, we've had really high membership across the state, like out of the gates. It's been phenomenal. And that's the same here for our district. I mean, we're poised to hit 12,000 members. That's another year increase again. And there are a lot of people getting engaged now, and they're getting engaged in meaningful ways. They're sort of re-energized, and you guys are seeing that too. And trustees in different districts are starting to sort of band together and talk with each other. So I think this has opened the lines of communication quite a bit. And so we're hoping to provide some empowerment and some ability for those average folks out there. And we have a lot of people who come to us, and you guys are looking for the parent perspective. We get a lot of that. But the bottom line is, a lot of times they feel a little helpless, like they're not sure what to do. They're like, well, Desaray, I don't know, I'm just I'm just a parent. And my reply is always, I am too. And our trustees are too. I mean, we don't get paid to do this, we're volunteers. And you're a volunteer as well. So, we all really have that same ability, and that matters. Those voices matter. And so we need to make those voices heard, and, don't feel like you're disempowered. We're all really on the same level, and we all need to get active and get out there. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight and just helping our community figure out what's what, to know that you all are advocating. Again, I'll make it really clear that PTA, from the national to the state to the local level, have all come out against vouchers or any system thereof where we take public funds away from public schools. That is our stance. We are first and foremost a child advocacy organization. And so we do stay in line with that. We believe that every single child has a right to education without barriers. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, trustees Bode and Smith. Thank you to our council members, and we will keep you all up to date, and we'll keep in contact with you as we continue this series. Thank you so much for joining us and informing our public. All right. Have a great night.